Hello, everybody. So we are joined by Brian this evening. Brian, thank you so much again for being able to join us this evening. So Brian is the director of Africa, which is a charity that started out by providing medical equipment to hospitals in Uganda, and that they saw a great need for disabled people in Uganda, and this is where Acheru was born. So Brian, over to you, and thank you again for being able to share with us this evening.
Thank you very much for the chance to. I love getting the opportunity to share something about what's happening in Uganda. And I want to focus later on our work with cerebral palsy. But before that, I want to go into a bit of background about how we came to be doing that work. My first involvement was 1984 when I went out to Mengo Hospital in Kampala to help put in a water system. And that was towards the end of the Obote years, and it was pretty ghastly. And I suppose I took a pragmatic approach when I saw that. My attitude was, God, why have you shown me this need? And I felt that I couldn't just do the job and go back home and forget about it. So I continued to supply a lot of equipment to the hospital. And then because of my connections there, I was asked to take over a small failing charity called Africare. And I ended up with the responsibility to develop a children's home there. I didn't work there myself. My main work was still sending the equipment, but I developed the home. And just that was based on a hillside outside Macono, lovely place. And we were regarded as slave drivers. We wanted to bring those boys up not being dependent. We wanted them to be able to fend for themselves, but we got in trouble with the social services sometimes over that there. They thought we were too hard on them. But if I tell you that the oldest boy, the first boy that we had in the home, he is now Chancellor of a medical university and recently won an American Revolution Award for his work with underprivileged people in Philadelphia. And the second boy that we ever had in the home is now the Rwandan ambassador for the United Nations. So some of them come out all right. When I was helping with equipment, I came in contact with a surgeon called Norgrove Penny. Norgrove was doing orthopedic work on children, and I was very impressed. I was sending out equipment, and I honestly hadn't the faintest idea what you would do with it. I was depending on other people to tell me that. But Norgrove showed me what he was doing with some of the things that I had sent out, including one little boy that he'd done spinal work on. And I was really touched by what he was doing. And I said, look, we have this lovely children's home and everything. Is there anything that we can do to assist with this? And he said that really they had the surgical capacity, but they needed rehab and they needed people to find the children. So we decided to build a rehabilitation unit ourselves. I would like to say that we prayed and agonized over it for a long time and did all this and that. We didn't. We went out and had a look around the site and said, well, if we're going to do this, where will we put the building? And we said, look, we'll put it up there. And there was a great big tree there. And we had some visitors there. One of them was Canadian. So we said, you're bound to be able to cut down trees. So he cut down the tree. So the next day, work started. And we built our first little disability unit. It was called Cherub. Now, we then eventually went on to a purpose-built unit, which is where Acheru comes in, a FIO child health education and rehabilitation unit. And what we do there is primarily rehabilitation. We would refer children for surgery. The hospitals are depending on people like us to find the children. There is surgical capacity in Uganda, but you've got to go out and find the children. And then we provide the post-operative treatment and the rehabilitation, some of it very lengthy. We have children who have been with us for years. But we have always tried to set standards. Whatever we're doing, we want to do it to the highest possible standard. It's a very visible witness, and news of that work spreads. And we've been getting patients, not just from far afield in Uganda, but even from beyond Uganda's borders. It has become quite well known because of the outcomes of the work that we are doing. We would conduct a lot of community outreaches to find children. That's organised by partner churches, schools, etc. We would let them do a lot of the preliminary work in their own areas and try to find children. often through the schools, because the children in the schools will know whether there's disabled children hidden away in their villages, and we'll get them together, and then our staff will go and work with them. Our inpatient work would focus largely on osteomyelitis, burns, contractures, clefts. Often, all too often, almost always neglected for years. This is the awful thing, that the capacity is there to deal with these things, but the children aren't being brought for treatment. And you can imagine with something like osteomyelitis, years of neglect makes it absolutely awful and leaves us with a very, very long road to recovery for the children. Inpatient work, we do a lot of inpatient work and in the unit or out at clinics. And the two big things there would be cerebral palsy, and we do a lot of club feet. The club feet are, I was going to say easy. We almost invariably are able to do it without surgical intervention, even up to young teenage children, just with serial casting and manipulation. And they're fine, they're treated, they recover, they walk away. Cerebral palsy is a much longer road. There's no cure for it. We have to first of all work with the parents to make them realize that perhaps that child still has potential for development. Cerebral palsy is such a visible disability that the child will be abandoned, left sitting in the corner. Not willfully neglected, they just don't realize that they can get a response from the child. So there's no development whatsoever. So that's our starting point with a child who has been hidden away. But the sad thing is, many of the ones who are hidden away, they're within the area of large hospitals and towns, and they still remain hidden. We have developed partnerships with a number of hospitals there, and we have said to them, you know, can we help you to develop a community program to find the disabled children? And they're saying, oh, but we don't have disabled children in our area. And we run a program with them, and we go out and beat the bushes, and local churches, schools, government find the children, and those hospitals are amazed. And they do have the capacity to assist with many of them or refer the serious ones to us. But it's a surprise to them to find there's so many in their area, including the most recent one was there's a major government hospital there at Nakasongola. And we had a community outreach in the area of that hospital and got a large number of children in that we're still dealing with. So they are still hidden away there in large numbers. Now, we work with partners. We can't do all this ourselves. We have a very good relationship with local government, with schools, with churches. We can go to them and make known exactly what we do so that they can go out and find children who are suitable cases for us to treat. We have also developed partnerships with a number of universities there. And now we're a small unit, but we're sufficiently well regarded in Uganda now that we are getting placements for international students. And it's wonderful for us that they are being gripped by the Christian ethos of the place as well. And we've had students from Canada and the United States going back home, and their parents then getting in touch with us to tell us what an impact it had and what a change it made in their time at Acheru. So, you know, it's wonderful to hear that there, that the work is making that impression. It's also very highly regarded in Uganda. It gave me a real boost recently when I heard the Ministry of Health regards it sufficiently that they are now referring clubfoot patients to us. So, you know, it's very good to have that relationship. We can't hope for financial support from them in Uganda. That's the reality of it. But we certainly get a lot of support from them. We get visiting government ministers. We get opportunities to promote the work. But it's also the case that you'll understand with Africa, the background of traditional practices, witchcraft, whatever. We are dealing sometimes with well-off professional people because there's a wealthy class there too. And we even had a case there recently with a child from the palace who had been hidden away for years, brought to witch doctors, whatever. They will bring the child traditional medicines, then they do the rounds of the witch doctors. If that's not successful, it's a norm for the mother will then sleep with the witch doctors. They go through all of this before they come to us. This is a problem for hospitals in general in Uganda. By the time they're patient is brought to hospital, they're in a very, very bad way because they've tried everything else first. So that's why hospitals can get their reputation of where people die rather than being cured. And that's something that we're still battling with. But our work, it's very visible, it can have a widespread influence, and we needed to be widely known if we're to get support as well. And I was very impressed that we have now been visited by the previous and the present Irish presidents have both visited. And we're very, very touched. They were visiting projects in Africa. And frankly, I think we were the only Protestant ones on the list that they were going to visit. So we got preferential treatment and they were great with us. We got on very, very well and actually featured on Irish television as well. So all of that helped to promote it. But our aim, it's always been a work of mission, but we can only effectively promote that mission if we're working to a very, very high standard. The first thing people see is the standard of the treatment that we provide. So my eye is always on how I can keep up the standards medically, whether it's through equipment or staff training or whatever. Keep up the standards, that gives us the opportunity then to witness to them. I read a lot about the pioneer missionaries there. I'm fascinated by the early work in Uganda. And 150 years ago, George Pilkington wrote, "You must give them the testimony of a Christian life. People must be made to realize that it is a power in your life and can be in theirs. They must know by your life that your profession is a true one." And the staff that we have, they're medical staff, but they have a lot of experience of evangelism. So this isn't something that's just an add-on, it's at the core of the work there. Joyce, our senior worker, she leads a Christian choir, has trained a choir of the children that go around and witness in schools, the disabled children. Margaret, our matron, is a trained child evangelist. Brian, our teacher, is a very well-known evangelist there as well. And we get wonderful opportunities. You might have heard a few years ago, there was a big fire at a school for blind children in Uganda. The fire was the day before Princess Anne was due to visit the school. And I've had connections to that school for many years in a very limited capacity. But 11 girls died in that fire that night. And they then came to me, was there anything I could do to help them? And when I delved into it, the Ugandan government, to their credit, took an interest and they were able to get a major telecoms company to offer to sponsor a new dormitory if they could find the support to deal with the aftermath, with the groundworks, with planning, with all of that. And I was able to do that for them. And so, to cut a long story short, when I first became involved with Salama, it was totally failing. I gave them some practical help. It gradually built up from 6 children until now there's over 80. But the remarkable thing to my mind is it is not a Christian school. It was adopted as a government school, but we now have, it's wide open for us to conduct a full Christian program with students there. And so our Acheru staff go there regularly. They take out an Acheru choir. They make it a full day of witness, testimonies, study, whatever. And we are running a full Christian program in that school. But now, to get back to cerebral palsy, it's an extremely high incidence. So we have a great deal of experience of it. And we recently run our annual Cerebral Palsy Day. We make that a very, very big event, promoting it widely, promotion, advocacy. We run parties, we run conferences to really make it known. But that's in the main to try to get them to bring children with cerebral palsy to us. And what we do with the cerebral palsy children, with young children, they're coming in on an outpatient basis. We can try then to bring them back on a day basis to work with them, to encourage the parents to do exercises with them, whatever can be done to help their development. We are now looking at the next step. We are not seeing the same number of surgical patients now as we were because there's more surgical capacity in Uganda. So we're going to use more of those beds to bring in cerebral palsy children for much more intensive work, maybe for a few weeks at a time, where we can work intensively with the child and with the parents. With older children, there's a real difficulty there because we find by the time they reach the age of around 10, they weren't being brought back as outpatients. And when we looked into that, they're invariably left with an old grandparent. They've become too heavy for the grandparent to carry them. They have no money for transport. So we're trying to find ways of bringing them in, of getting walking aids for them, of providing wheelchairs, whatever. And our first step with any of those cerebral palsy children is get them upright. They've been sitting in the corner, nobody looks at them. It's remarkable with some of them, within days, we can have them upright, maybe with the aids or whatever, but we've got them on their feet and they're able to look people in the eye. And the whole perception then changes. And some of them have a remarkable capacity for development. They're not going to be a complete cure, but those children have potential and we try to find that. Now, I want to come to northern Uganda because the picture there is very different in what we're trying to do. We started a unit at Minakulu a number of years ago when we saw the needs in the north. We used it as a base to conduct outpatient clinics, community outreaches over a wide area, to take surgical referrals, whatever. And of course, also then working with cerebral palsy. Now, that ran its course. We worked with local clinics so that they could take it all over. They can now refer children to us. And we then looked, well, where's the greatest need now? And we talked to local government and the Ministry of Health and identified NAPAC in Karamoja. That is distant, very, very troubled area. It's a growing area, but it lacks any effective infrastructure at present. And we thought, well, right, that's where we need to be. And the staff went up to investigate this. And I got a big shock when they sent me the statistics. They organised community outreaches and sent to bring in disabled children from the area through the schools. We have a partner with an educational organisation there now. And when I saw the statistics, the children that were brought in, the disabled children that were brought in, 90% were cerebral palsy. And I was staggered at that. So I said, okay, well, go and find out why. So they went to investigate and they came back and they said the cause was, they said there weren't enough bicycles. And I had to think about that. And I thought, well, what's the connection? And it's oxygen starvation at birth, botched births in the villages, Karamojong women delivering from a crouching position, babies falling on their heads, all sorts of issues. And the issue of the bicycles, they didn't have the capability to bring the mothers to maternity centres or to hospitals. Now, there are various facilities there if you've got transport to get to them, but that was not happening. So we're taking the attitude for those people, prevention is obviously going to be much, much better than cure. Instead of a lifelong burden for the child and for the family, let's see if we can deal with these problems by making sure they do have access, that if a birth is due, they're getting proper antenatal services, they have access to transport to take them to a maternity centre. So our intention is to work with local facilities to develop those connections, to make the connections. And so we need to base workers there to do that. So that's our next step, to base workers, to provide the liaison with all of these services and to provide the community education. That's where our expertise lies with Acheru. And we're fortunate in already having a number of local partners. One is a big educational organisation with access through all of their schools to do extensive work with children. We are also working with local churches who are developing a witness to disabled children, other people developing welfare work with the disabled. So all of this is coming together. If we can provide the workers to we often find this, when we scratch the surface, there are people there able to do these different things, but nobody's joining up the dots. And I find that our staff are particularly gifted at going into an area and making the connections and getting them working together, not just trying to protect what we're doing, but getting everybody together for a maximum effect. So we are now planning to build. We have bought land there. We've bought 3 acres. We've already planted crops on it. And we're presently having plans approved by the local council to accommodate workers there, one full-time, others on rotation from Acheru, and probably able to accommodate one or two children who are going to be relayed down to Acheru. But we won't be doing much work with patients there other than cerebral palsy. In the main, patients referred to us, they'll be going down to Acheru and dealt with from there. So we will be able to work with children with cerebral palsy, but the main thing is the prevention. With the numbers, the sheer statistics, we've got to be able to do something. The sheer numbers, I didn't believe the figures at first. And I went back and said, look, is that figure the correct? I said, yes, it is. And my first reaction, it's come up over and over and over again. I say, why has nothing been done yet? And we've often come across this in Uganda, even in areas where you would expect it to have long been dealt with, but it hasn't been. The gaps are still there. They still exist. Now, in terms of prayer, we need wisdom in planning all this because it's a new venture for us. One particular concern is safety in travelling. It's a long distance, it's bad roads, and I am concerned about that. So I want to minimise the travel by having people based there for longer periods, not travelling up and down to run clinics. We have Joyce, Harriet, Margaret, our three senior workers. They've been with us from the very start and they've become personal friends. Timothy, Brian, Dennis, Rose, Brenda, in other medical capacities with us. They have a great ability to plan. They're able to provide very clear and lucid proposals for solutions to these problems. I'm very, very happy with what they have come up with. Now, all of that so far, it's a work that down the years has been doing very, very well, has had great results, has been well known for it, but we've been touched, we've had difficulties too. Don't get the idea that it's been straightforward. You know, it has been touched by tragedy. And we've lost workers as well. We lost Masumbuko. He was a young man who we thought was a great candidate to eventually take over and chair the work out there. He died in a road accident, another reminder just of the dangers there. Another young man with us, Apollo, who started training as a surgeon, remained attached to us and intended to remain with Acheru, but got a scholarship to study surgery, and he was murdered. So, you know, we have had those losses. I highly value the staff that we have, but it's a very, very high risk environment in terms of travel and other problems, and we can never lose sight of that. We are very, very fortunate that at Acheru, it is relatively secure. It's in an area where we're surrounded by schools, by a community who all know what we're doing, and we make them all aware of what we're doing. The local police take a very great interest and come in to visit us. Local government come and visit. It's a well-known work. One of the first things we're trying to do now on that land that we've got up at Napak, we want to put in water. We only recently got a borehole at Acheru, which was a huge benefit to us, a great saving for us in terms of trying to get water when there wasn't enough rainfall. At Napak, we've identified there is water there, and we're trying to get a scheme going now to put in a borehole, which will be shared with the community. That means we would hope to be able to get a donor to put in the borehole for us as a community borehole that we'll have water. And as we do this, we will be making the community, local community, very much aware of what we're doing. We'll get them on side if we're helping to provide water for them. They're the people can make the work known, can spread the news wider. And in what happened at Minakulu, we know there from a very small beginning, the huge area that we were covering in terms of community outreaches and how far afield people were coming from. And we hope Napak is going to be the same. With Minakulu, we always did it with the intention of handing over to local services and moving on. I think Napak will be different. I think we're in for the long haul there in developing a base there and possibly building more, but that's for the future. We'll see what happens as we get to learn more about the area. Now, I'll finish now just with one wonderful quote that I got. As I said, I'm talking about what we're doing medical. It is very, very much a work of witness. people coming there become part of our Acheru family. We try to keep in contact with them, attach them to local churches. We would regularly organise events or parties, for example, coming up to Christmas, to bring them all back together. Bear in mind, families coming in there, a mother, for example, coming in with a child, because of the disability of the child, they will have been ostracised in their own community. People don't want to know them. They're outcasts. They come to Acheru and they're within this family of people in the same situation. And it's wonderful. If you saw the change it makes, we obviously change in the children. If you saw the change it makes in the parents and the carers, to see others in the same situation. But then when they go back to the village and there's this visible witness of what can be done for the child, and people realize that child wasn't cursed. That's a child of God like any other. And it's a wonderful witness to a whole community. But I got a wonderful endorsement. We have partnerships with a number of universities there. And there was a visiting professor of history at Uganda Christian University. And he wrote to me afterwards. He brought his wife out to visit Acheru. And he wrote to me afterwards and he said it was the nearest he had seen to an expression of Christ's love on earth. So I thought, okay, we've hit the mark with that. So that's where we are. And as I say, we are small, but it's been wonderful that we've maintained the support and had the stability to get to where we are now. Anything else I can tell you?
Thank you so much, Brian. I mean, it's incredible hearing how the project's grown and the impact that it's had. I find it amazing. I mean, you saying that it's just as simple as making eye contact with the children and getting them upright, to me, that just seems amazing how a tiny encouragement has such a huge impact. So thank you for sharing what you have. I just wondered if anyone would like to ask you some questions, if you're happy to answer, if anyone has got
Yes,
any
yes.
questions after what you've said.
Let me start, Brian. Can you just give us a specific story of the impact? I mean, you've talked about obviously the things that have happened, but is there kind of a specific story you can think of that you can share with us about the difference that the work of Acheru has made?
I'll give you an example of one child, not a cerebral palsy child, but a girl in the village with horribly deformed legs, dreadfully deformed legs. And really, she was just sitting in the dirt in the village, and all we could do was amputate. But we got her fitted up with artificial limbs. And 2 years ago, she graduated as a doctor and's now got a post in a hospital in Western Uganda. And has actually traveled the world also as an ambassador for Paralympic sport.
Wow.
In terms of other disabilities, with the blind children that we're working with, we're trying to follow through there to see what comes next for them. And the government is quite enlightened about that and is trying to make a pathway to help them through education. So we're watching them go on to the next stage. With a lot of the other disabled children we have, the main impact is getting them back into education. A lot of the disabled children have not been able to go to school. This is an awful thing that have been sitting there disabled. They're 11, 12, 13 years old, sitting with awful deformities in the village that have prevented them going to school. And we enable them to go to school. Or we have ones that they are reluctant to go to school because they're ridiculed for their disability at school. And we're able to turn that around as well. So, it's totally life-changing for the child, for the family, for the community. You can have unexpected consequences as well. Frankly, sometimes you get a wake-up call that this is Africa and there's things that we haven't realized. There was one boy we were doing that involved serial casting. He was with us for a long time. And if they're going to be long-term with us, we try to keep up the connection with their village. So they took him back for a visit and the villagers screamed and ran away. And we never even realized his leg was in plaster. And the villagers thought we were trying to make him into a white child, one limb at a time. That's something that we had a learning curve too. It never even occurred to us. But they would try to keep a community actively involved in a child's treatment. So they bring the child back, show them what's being done. They're not all a complete cure. Some of them may be confined to a wheelchair or something, and we still want them to be part of the village instead of being isolated. And that invariably that does work. And often now you will find that a village headman will be the one who will persuade a parent to bring a child to us. If we get one child from a village, we know there's a lot of others will follow there.
Thank you.
Did anyone have any other questions at all for Brian, or? Nope.
If not, I've just got one more then.
Yes.
One more. So you've talked about what you're doing in NAPAC, and the way you're seeking to kind of grow that. How many children do you think you would be able to kind of help at the moment? I know it's a growing thing and you're kind of setting it up, but what is kind of the capacity that you're kind of dealing with, or you're hoping to deal with?
Well, back at Acheru, we have a maximum capacity of 37 beds. It's rare we would have that number in. So we can easily refer children down there. At NAPAC, in terms of existing cerebral palsy cases, there's an awful lot of them there. If we can start doing things, running clinics or out centres that parents are able to bring children to, or we go to them, I would have thought if we're able to work with the school partners, we could bring in big numbers. Use a school classroom at a weekend to bring in 30 children, whatever, try to do something with them. It's very, very hard to gauge the numbers. The big impact is going to be from prevention there because of the sheer numbers. I should have mentioned the issues there, as well as the botched births. You have an issue there with young girls giving birth. Very difficult births. Young girls from Karamoja gravitate to Kampala, go into prostitution, get pregnant, then come back up to NAPAC. And they're having very, very difficult births resulting in cerebral palsy. So the big thrust is going to be on prevention, but certainly we will be making provision for working with existing cerebral palsy cases. Maybe there are ones we would send down for that intensive care at Acheru. I would certainly be very, very open to that there. Joyce is very strong for that, to bring them in for a number of... She knows what they're able to do, but she can see how much more could be done if we brought them in as inpatients for intensive work over a number of weeks, rather than just in on a day basis.
Great, thanks. We've got a hand up, Hannah.
Yes, I think Sylvia, sorry, did you want to unmute it? Did you have a question? Sorry.
Yes, hello. I was wanting to ask, are you doing most of this remotely, or are you living in Uganda? How does that all work for communications?
No, I used to go out regularly, but I don't now. But I have very, very good Ugandan staff. It's under a very, very experienced Ugandan board. And really, in effect, really, I'm providing the money. I mean, I didn't come up with the ideas for this or anything. These are proposals that they have brought to me on the basis of their experience there. On the board, we have very, very experienced people. And all of this that they have brought to me, I'm very, very happy to back it. I've spent a lot of time out there in the past. I mean, I've seen on the ground exactly what they're doing, been out at the clinics, everything. But now they're the ones that know much better than I do how to get on with this here. They're all highly professionally qualified for what they're doing there.
Yeah, no, that's fair enough. Okay, thank you.
I should mention actually too, we recently have made changes to the board out there. And now Joyce, who is in charge there, she has a degree in medical administration as well as a nursing background. Harriet and Margaret, a lot of training in community-based rehabilitation, graduate physiotherapist, graduate clinical orthopedic officer, graduate social worker. and then the board with Moses as chairman, who's immensely experienced in community-based rehabilitation work with big organisations there. Harriet and Joyce represent Acheru on the board, and then we have a hospital administrator, a lawyer, an accountant, a pastor. So it's a good structure there, and as I say, we're partnered with the universities, so we get a lot of expertise from them as well.
Great, thank you so much, Brian. I think if no one else has any burning questions, we'd love to just take some time to pray for you and to pray for Acheru as well, and the project in NAPAC, development of that. So thank you so much for what you have shared. We'll just break out into rooms now for 10 minutes, everybody, if that's okay, and just pray through some of the things that Brian has shared with us this evening. Thank you.